discussion and meditation. And this week we're continuing our questions and answers session. And this week I had suggested for your consideration the first two verses of the Dhammapada, the first chapter of the twins chapter. And basically that all phenomena are led by the mind. Mind is their master, mind is their maker. Act or speak with an impure mind, then suffering will follow, as the cartwheel follows the foot of the ox. And in the same way, if one acts or speaks with a pure state of mind, then happiness will follow, as your shadow follows you around. Now, this stanza is also translated in different ways. Now, I'm going to chant the Pali verse, if you can understand the Pali words. Mano pubbangama dhamma, mano sitta mano maya, manasaci paduttina, basativa karotiva, tato nam dukkam anveti, chakam vavahato padam, manopubbangama dhamma, manositta manomaya, manasaci pasannina, basativa karotiva, tato nam sukkam anveti, chayava anapayini. Now, if you're able to follow those Pali words, manopubbangama dhamma. So basically it means all dhammas are preceded by the mind. And the way I translated it was all phenomena, all conditioned phenomena are preceded by the mind. Because dhammas, basically all dhammas means the five aggregates of clinging and every form of material matter and all of our thoughts, feelings, ideas, and decisions that we make, all these are preceded by the mind. Now, what does it mean by the mind? And basically that means, of course, consciousness, and it's preceded by the accumulated sankharas that we've been accumulating, not only in this life, but even from the ones we have brought over from a past life. So when it says, and another translation that you find is all actions are led by the mind. Mind is the master, mind is the maker. So all actions kind of has a limited viewpoint, but it's our actions, our karmic actions, which predominantly are bringing us our suffering or our happiness. But it's not just our actions are led by the mind, but it's all phenomena. That means the way we think and view and perceive, these are preceded by the habits and the conditionings of the past. But because the rest of the verse was, if one acts or speaks with the impure state of mind, then suffering will follow, or if one acts or speaks with the pure state of mind, happiness will follow. So it's our states of mind and the actions that we speak based on those states of mind that creating the karma and will create the results coming back to us from those karmic actions. So that's why certain translators chose to translate that as all actions are led by the mind. That means a speech too, because it's directly involved and connected with the law of karma. And we've talked a great deal about the law of karma. So now every time we act or speak or repeat any action, all those, the five aggregates, basically they're involved in anything that we do or speak. It's the contact, the aggregate of material forms, which contact, producing the feelings, which produce the previous perceptions, and our memories and thoughts connected with those perceptions. So that's the mental activity. That's what it means, is created by the mind. That happens before we decide to do something. So if you decide to kill a fly, for example, then all those aggregates, the mind would have gone through all those and trigger off the desire to, maybe, kill a fly, or even to scratch an itch, or if you hear a sound or want to look at something. So that's the meaning of it. All those mental sankharas and the aggregates, the four aggregates of form, feeling, perception, volition, and in the consciousness are preceding these actions, or the actions or the speech. And if they're of an impure mind, then suffering will follow. In a pure mind, then happiness will follow. Now, this is a question that came up. Somebody has sent in a question about this, because that's what I was encouraging people to, if they have any questions about these verses, to send in a question. So this question is, when it is said the pure mind, what does the word pure mean? And similarly, the word impure. And this person gives some comment on it. It says, when a layperson on the street usually does not consider purity or impurity as mental states. And if they read these verses, they might question what it means. So how would you explain to a person who is curious about Buddhism what an impure or a pure mind is? So basically, that's a pure, what defiles the mind. Actually, the Buddha said this in one verse, one stanza. He said, this mind is illuminous, basically meaning this pure. The nature of our consciousness is essentially pure, but it has become impure by the accumulation of so many defilements over the course of, beginningless time, and keep on accumulating them. So basically, the Buddha defined the impurity as greed, hatred, and delusion, and all the spin-off mental states, emotions, mental states, and so on, like irritation, obstinacy, and ill will, and just every possible spin-off from greed, hatred, and delusion. So even attachments, desires, ill will, resentment towards persons, prejudices, so many, all these are what we call impure state of mind, because it colors our mind, and it brings these painful results to it. And it doesn't allow us to see the real, true, pure nature of the mind. So basically, to keep it simple, the impure mind means any even our thoughts, speech, and action. So all karma is accumulated through these, what are called the three doors. First, it arises in the mind. You have a desire, and then you speak or you do a bodily action. So, so those thoughts and those impulses, if they're based on attachment, desire, aversion, any of those spin-off states, and delusion. And delusion basically is not knowing the truth, but particularly it's, because of wrong views and also our ego. So our ego, our sense of self, is also considered an impurity of the mind, because it is something based on attachment and aversion. I mean, everything, basically our sense of self, and I've given this talk before on the nature of consciousness, and giving the example of a baby when it's born, it doesn't have a sense of self, but then it starts to develop desires and aversions, and then starts wanting desirable objects in the future, and to avoid unpleasant, painful objects in the future. And it gets caught up in the tug of war between the past and the future. And everything we've experienced, the mind is divided into these things I like and these things I don't like. And the whole life is spent acting and reacting to get things that we think we want, and to get away from the things that we don't want, pleasurable and painful things. So anyway, so the impure states of mind are, again, attachment, aversion, and, well, we call it ego, basically selfish greed and aversion. And also it's not understanding the truth, delusion, being deluded, thinking that taking what is real for essentially what that it is not real, and believing what is real to be false and what is false to be real. And we can see that especially in this day and age, these recent couple of years or two, where there's attachment to theories and weird ideas, about so many things are getting prevalent, and they're becoming even, spreading and causing so much suffering. I mean, really a lot of suffering. People are being killed because of wrong views. I suppose you might read the news and so on. So it's actually good sometimes to hear what's going on in the news, because it, reinforces some of these ideas of the Dhamma, about, thought of, delusions and wrong views can lead even to death. Well, we can see that it does. So anyway, and so the pure mind is the elimination of greed, hatred, and delusion, but it's not done overnight. So, ultimately the pure mind would only belong to an arahant, or somebody who is fully enlightened, or is fully overcome, permanently overcome all of the traces of greed, hatred, and delusions in the mind. And that's usually considered to be an arahant. So even sotapannas, once returners, they still have a certain amount of defilements remaining in their mind too. But anyway, as you work, the whole practice of Dhamma, of course, the whole practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, is to gradually eliminate these impurities. And there's another Dhammapada verse. I don't know if I can can quote it exactly, but little by little, let a person remove the impurities from the mind as a goldsmith removes the impurity from gold. So let's say a person gets gold or any other thing, they go through a lot of process of purifying, even water purification or purifying different things. It's not just a snap your finger and it's pure. It goes through a long process and maybe multiple processes to gradually remove the impurities from, even just, material objects. Like even washing your clothes, right? If you want to remove a stain or something, it may not come out the first time, or remove odors from places. So like that, in purifying the mind, it can take a whole lifetime or many lifetimes of gradually purifying the mind of greed, hatred, and delusion. But it's the amount of greed, hatred, and delusion that is going to determine the severity and the frequency of the kinds of suffering that's going to keep coming back to you. So when we purify little by little, we purify our mind of, like, observing precepts is a very good example. So, we take the 5 precepts or even 8 precepts or more precepts as a way to help restrain our mind from, repeating our habits that bring, problems and suffering to us, especially in terms of, like, the 5 precepts, not living disciplined by the 5 precepts. So that's basically the meaning of that. So those actions follow us around. And, even something that you might have done 10 years ago, maybe you told a lie 10 years ago, stole something 10 years ago. Even people have committed murders 30, 40 years ago, and now they're only being caught, with the increase in DNA and all kind of other things. People have been hiding from being caught from so many crimes. Now they're starting to get caught. So even after so many years or even lifetimes. So even the Buddha talked about people doing things in previous lives and reaping the result of that, many lifetimes later. Like the famous example of Mahamoggallana, who it says had murdered his parents, many, many lifetimes ago. And then he realized that he couldn't die in this, he'd attained arahantship, but he knew that he had to pay the price of that deed before he could die. And there's a story behind it, but I'm not going to repeat it now, about how some robbers eventually came and broke every bone in his body with sticks and clubs. And then he realized, that they really wanted to. Then he went back and he remembered, that's because I had killed my parents. And so then he sort of finished that karmic deed. Anyway, that's a story, quite a well-known story in the text, to show how our evil actions, and also the wholesome actions, even wholesome actions can take their effect years or even lifetimes, in the future too. Like there's stories of some person who gave alms to a monk in a previous life, and in this lifetime, because of that, and maybe some other things too, they were able to, hear the Dhamma and attain, entering the stream, or even the state of an anagama from the merits that had been done even in the past life. So that's the meaning of this verse about how guarding the mind is so important. And even for small, trivial things, because even people do a lot of things. They, I tell a little white lie, it's not a problem. Or, just, take something, it's okay. But, if you give the mind a little bit, it's very, without hardly knowing it, it starts wanting more and so on. So anyway, that is about the training in the Dhamma. Okay? So I hope that answered the question for the person who asked that. Now, let's see if there's any other questions in the chat box. Anyway, it's another one of these complicated questions that most people are not going to understand. Actually, consciousness is mentioned in that mind. Consciousness is part of the mind too. So it refers to both the feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. It seems that one person has asked all these questions. And I think in my explanation, I would have answered those. All right. So is there any other questions or anybody who wanted to ask a question?
If there is a hand there, they can unmute themselves and ask the question.
Okay.
I don't see the hand, but.
Hey, Bhante, this is Dennis. It's my hand.
Oh, okay. Dennis.
Question, you've taught us in the past about being fully present in the awareness, in the now awareness. And I was wondering what from that experience of the awareness goes into becoming a memory, a conditioned memory that's accessible by thought or, other volitional activity. Is there a difference between the awareness and the thinking process or is there no contact? Does nothing move into memory from that now?
Well, a person is not going to live totally in the now except an arahant. But that doesn't mean they don't have a memory and they can remember things and they can, but they don't accumulate karma. When the mind is pure, it doesn't accumulate karma. It doesn't mean that they don't remember anything, but they don't accumulate karma to bring a result in the future, as that verse was saying. So, there's a difference when you talk about the pure mind or pure awareness. There's an awareness with the aggregates remaining, and then there's the nibbana element when the arahant dies. So as long as we are, living in the body, unless we go into the samapattis, that means we go into the fruition, we go into the attain the jhanas, or go into the phala sampatti, or the jhanas beyond thought. Only then you're not going to maybe have any memories and so on. But ordinary memories will come. But if you want to, like the Buddha, every morning he used to survey the world and find somebody who was, ready to hear the Dhamma or about to do some unskillful action. So he would manifest in front of that person and teach them the Dhamma, so to prevent them from doing an unskillful deed. So just having awareness doesn't mean you're unconscious, or you're not conscious about the things around you. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Bhante.
There is a question in the chat. How do you work on reducing ill will?
How do you work on reducing ill will? Well, the Buddha gave instructions in the Vitakka Santana Sutta about the removal of the hindrances. And the ill will is one of the hindrances. And ill will, basically, it's connected with aversion and, clinging to one's ideas and memories. This person beat me, this person robbed me, this person did this to me, or did this to my loved ones, or don't believe the way you do, so you have ill will toward them, because they're threatening they're threatening something you have, or even they're threatening your beliefs. Maybe you have to start to question, maybe what Trump says is real. Ooh, some of these people are, believing a lot of weird stuff, and so they're increasing their ill will, or they can decrease it if, by, not clinging on to even your ideas and opinions about things. So anyway, so it's all about mindfulness, and it's about practicing the Eightfold Path, basically. I mean, people ask us, but the Buddha taught the Eightfold Path. Read it, understand it, practice it. They always want some other way, or teach me something else. No, there's no other else. That's the only else. You've got to develop mindfulness. You've got to, live by the precepts. You have to develop right speech. You have to, all these steps of the Eightfold Path are there for a reason, because they help to condition the ability to then, when you meditate. I mean, the important part is gaining mindfulness, and then the right effort to abandon unwholesome states and create the wholesome states. So really, the right understanding, the right effort, and the right mindfulness, these are the three things that are the most important for reducing ill will. So first, when ill will arises, you have to understand this is ill will. And not say, well, I have the right to be angry with this person because they did that to me. No, this is ill will. You recognize it and understand what it does to you. Understand how it triggers off your anger. And then think, how did this ill will arise? Well, because of attachments, some kind of attachments that you've created in the past, or clinging to your sense of self. They insulted you. Oh, they said I'm stupid, or I'm ugly, or something like that. They challenged you. So no one likes to be challenged like that. So it's clinging to the sense of self. We have to understand that. And then we have to work on, weakening that sense. So right mindfulness and right view, right effort. So the mindfulness comes first, you recognize something. Then the right view says, this particular emotion is unskillful. If I follow it, it's going to bring me pain. And then you try to cultivate the opposite of that, of, let's say, practicing metta. Instead of having ill will toward a person, you say, well, this person, okay, they might have done this to me, but they're also sick. This person probably got up on the wrong side of the bed, had an argument with their spouse. Give them a break, or something. Have I not done any of those things? Always ask yourself, am I free from all these things? So these are different ways that we have to ponder and reflect when our emotions and other negative states come up. And to see how they're conditioned. And if we keep following them, we're going to just keep increasing our ill will. And that ill will could eventually turn into, some action of, killing somebody or worse, or so many other things. So that's why there's many ways of contemplating. But first, the most important is the mindfulness, and then understanding that this is unskillful. And if you follow it, then your problems are going to just keep increasing and not decreasing. And then deliberately cultivate, try to the opposite qualities of that. This question here in the chat box, this next question is, the Buddha mentions that the mind can destroy an entire village in a snap. What about that? It's kind of metaphorical. It's I'm not going to get into that because even I won't be able to explain it exactly right. But for example, what is Putin doing now? In Putin's mind, his idea, he's causing a war that's affecting the whole world. So that's not happening in a snap, but even 6 months now is a finger snap in terms of geological time, right? So it means that the mind and our actions can destroy. Within 10 seconds, if his mind wanted to, it could press the nuclear button and destroy a whole village. Of course, a few minutes later, somebody else is going to push a button and destroy their villages, and the world could be destroyed. So it's not this is the way we have to think about these things. It's true. The mind can destroy an entire village, not in a finger snap maybe, but this is what it means. It means what the mind can wreak havoc and destruction. So that's the way we should try to interpret that. I'm not going to get into these political, different political arguments and taking sides and so on. But people that cause suffering to others, they're going to reap the karma. And if that karma is somebody else going and killing them, well, that's their karma. And that's how wars and hatred has been, continuing since, prehistoric time, or even since, the many centuries, right? One country doing to another, or people doing to another, the fights between religious groups and so on. When we retaliate, it's going to make the other person want to retaliate more, and it never ends until something occurs. Okay. Okay, any other questions? All right, okay. Any more hands up there?
No, Bhante.
Okay. So anyway, this is something, like for your homework in the next week, just, be aware. And if you notice any so-called impure thoughts arising in your mind, or even reflect back, in the past and see what you did out of greed, hatred, and delusion, and how it followed you, even for, if it was the next 5 minutes or the next hour or the next day or the next week. You lose sleep, you're tossing and turning in your bed, worrying that somebody's going to find out what you did or something else. I mean, and you can see the meaning of these sutta. Whether it's a physical action you do, it's a speech that you do, or even your own thoughts. But also the good things too. So be aware of, if you, out of an act of kindness or generosity, you helped somebody, or you did something, or you practiced meditation, you got some insights that help to overcome some delusions. Those are wholesome, very wholesome, very positive things. So, we can bring these Dhammapada verses to life, to our life and the reality.
Dhammapada also related to the skandha, the 5 aggregates of clinging, which you were explaining. But one of the 5 aggregates of clinging is the word consciousness. Now, I'm a little confused about how consciousness is a hindrance, is a causes clinging.
Okay, a person has a question that consciousness, being part of the mind, one of the aggregates, one of the 5 aggregates, the mind, you understand how can it cause clinging? Because the consciousness has our ego in it. Whenever we're conscious, usually we have the sense of I, and unless you're enlightened, unless you're an arahant, you're going to have some trace of I behind it. But the average person has a lot of I behind it. So you're clinging to that. I am right, I. Just reflect in your mind. Every single thing you do is preceded, not maybe consciously, but from the standpoint of I, me, and mine. These are what are called the trinity of the ego. I, me, and mine. In everything you're talking, right? I'm going here, I'm going there, I think this, I like that, I don't like that, give it to me, look at me, mine. So this is clinging to the consciousness, because we think we own consciousness, but consciousness is also not self. Like the young baby isn't born with the ego consciousness yet. It acquires it, but that's because of conditioning and previous ignorance. But still, that's the meaning of it. We're clinging to the consciousness as being I, me, or mine, and therefore the objects that are within consciousness, thinking that I'm going to get these objects and I'm going to experience some pleasure from this object, or I'm going to get away from this object and not have to experience the pain of this person or something else. So that motivates probably 98% of all your actions from the moment you get up in the morning, the moment you go to sleep at night. So that's the meaning of it.
So consciousness in this sense really is referring to the ego.
Yes, because everyone has it, unless you're an arahant. The arahant's not clinging to the consciousness.
But when we're doing meditation, especially the lesson meditation, we're trying to fully realize anicca. That will eventually eradicate the belief in the I, correct?
It's the wisdom that eradicates the belief in an I.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
It's the wisdom that eradicates the sense of I. Anyway, it's complicated. It's more than we can discuss in just this short moment. I've given talks on that before. Yes, if you speed up the rate of your perception, where you see 1,000 things per second arising and vanishing, then the sense of I will disappear from your mind because it has no time to think or remember the past or future about any of these objects. And that's the way the sense of self dissolves from the mind temporarily in meditation, because the mind is no longer clinging or identifying with any of the 5 aggregates. Because that's how the sense of self gets its identity, is on its past and the future, in remembering things of that. Oh, I was born in 1948, and my mother and father, and my brother and sister, I did all these things. And so it's the remembrance of that that keeps on reinforcing this sense of I'm going to do that, tomorrow or next week, next day, 20 years from now. And so it's constantly being reinforced. Okay, friends, I think we might end this discussion now, so we can have a little yoga session and a good meditation. Okay? So take a few minutes. We'll come back and we'll start the yoga session.
Sadhu, Bhante.